Hello, everybody. I've had a real rough last couple of weeks. I've had the flu and a bad sinus infection. And although I'm feeling better, I'm still not out of the woods yet. I'm in immunotherapy, and they tell me the cancer's gone, but I've got remnants to deal with. And coming back is not going to be easy. Thank you for all the kindness you've shown. And I'm going to show this Janelle Cook Recovering the Lost World tonight. I hope you enjoy it.
A historical synopsis of Saturnian cosmology from John Cook's website, saturniancosmology.org. There will be a link in the description. It gets pretty deep. The chapters of this site will propose that the biology of our planet, our culture, our psychology, and our very existence are the result of a series of incidents arising from the interaction between Earth and other planets within the solar system, most notably Saturn. The biology of Earth is such that a complete accident, and so utterly unlike it, will not have ever been duplicated anywhere at any time among the billions of other star systems. But here on Earth, all of it, especially the rise of complex species since the Cambrian period 560 million years ago, can be attributed to a series of cataclysmic plasma strikes by Saturn, each of a very long duration. Biologists claim 10,000 years for the extinction events. My original estimate was 15,000 years. As hominids, we survived the last externally induced extinction event, which gave rise to 8 competing subspecies over the course of the last 3 million years. Our only contribution to our distinction from other animals was the invention, 10,000 years ago, of language and its subsequent cultural transmission that set the stage for further development of our humanity. Much later on, and much closer to our time, subjective consciousness. It all started very long ago, at one time, and from its genesis, Earth was a planet in orbit around Saturn, a brown dwarf star, toward the end of the Precambrian, 600 million years ago. The Saturnian system intersected with the solar system. Saturn was swept around the sun and back into deep space, to return at regular 26 to 27 million year intervals. Over the course of time, some of the satellites, planets of Saturn, were wrenched from their orbits around Saturn to end up revolving around the Sun instead. The Earth likely became a solar system planet at the end of the Permian, 250 million years ago. From 600 million years ago, Saturn kept entering the solar system regularly to disturb its lost satellites, now circling the Sun. At about 3 million years ago, Saturn likely had a run-in with Jupiter, a solar system planet at that time, orbiting the Sun at a distance probably somewhat less than the Earth's orbit today. The orbital period of Saturn was significantly reduced as a result. During the last 3 million year period, Saturn started scavenging its lost satellites, and perhaps solar system planets, all in orbit close to the Sun. The possibility of a captured planet again orbiting Saturn at its equator is virtually nil. Instead, the scavenged planets ended up in superpolar or subpolar locations, the only locations which seem to be dynamically stable. Because Saturn had come in from outside of the solar system, and most likely was a star originally, it would have been at a very high positive charge level. distinct from the solar system planets. Solar system planets would have been attracted to Saturn when Saturn entered the solar system, rather than be repelled, as would be the case of two planets with nearly equal values of charge. Saturn, with its stack of captured planets, was seen by hominids, Homo erectus, and recorded in the shapes of artifacts in the Paleolithic of about 2 million years ago, and by humans, Homo sapiens, as carved images in the Upper Paleolithic from 30,000 BC, and by the hundreds of millions during the early Neolithic, 10,000 to 3,000 BC, when the stack of planets was much more frequently seen. At about 10,900 BC, Earth, at that time a planet of the Sun, made an electric field contact with Saturn, causing 1,500 years of darkness. Oh yeah, shadow on Earth. The period of darkness is recognized by many of the world's creation myths, and was recorded in the illustrated graphic books of Mesoamerica, references to which are made in colonial period documents. Climatologically, the period is identified today as the Younger Dryas, when for some 1,500 years Earth got as cold as it had ever been. Over the next 7,000 years, the orbit of Earth, apparently equal to the orbit of Saturn at that time, but below Saturn, progressively moved laterally to have Earth's orbital path eventually travel below the center of Saturn. Thus, between 10,900 BC and 3147 BC, Earth was part of a strange configuration of stacked planets, a condition which provided long summers and a mild climate in the northern hemisphere. Planets dominated by the giant form of Saturn stood above the north horizon and close to Earth, but measured in millions of miles, and were taken by humans to be gods, who supported them and for whose benefit they labored at agriculture and conducted trade. Initially, during a 1,500-year period after 10,900 BC, when the cold of the Younger Dryas set in, and long before Saturn was clearly seen, 3 fiercely lighted ball plasmoids were seen far south of Earth. Below the South Pole, between about 10,900 BC and 8347 BC, these connected to Saturn in the north via strands of brilliant arcs of electrons. Forms of various shapes ran south over these electron lines, traveling toward the 3 plasmoids. The moving shapes were taken to be dead animals and dead humans. The objects in the sky became the basis for all original religions and a good deal of mythology throughout the world, for they persisted in showing nightly and seasonally over the course of 2,500 years to 8347 BC, although only for 3 periods of hundreds of years. For the people of Mesoamerica, the year 8347 BC, when the last of the plasmoids extinguished after 2,500 years, was the end of their first tally of years, which accounted for the first creation. We know only a little about these ball plasmoids from obscure mythological references, and we would still not know very much if it had not been for an investigation undertaken by a team led by Anthony Peratt of Los Alamos National Labs, of some 4 million petroglyphs worldwide, carved high up on mountainsides facing in all directions, but always with a clear view toward the south. That study, published in the journal IEEE Transactions on Plasma Science in 2003, was an absolutely astounding revelation. More on that in a later chapter. In 4077 BC, Saturn dropped its coma. This had been the chaos before creation, which had lasted some 7,000 years. It had obscured Saturn and its companion satellites. Saturn went nova. It switched to arc mode. In a mass expulsion, Saturn produced its rings and a new satellite, Venus, and perhaps another. That's interesting. So they're saying that Venus came from Saturn and not Jupiter, like Velikovsky does. Okay. And Saturn lit up more brilliantly than the Sun to the humans of Earth, who had not clearly seen the real Sun for thousands of years because of the shadow of the Younger Dryas, followed by the obscurity of the enclosing plasmasphere of Saturn. This was the start of creation, start of time, and the first showing of the land and its resident gods, the satellites of Saturn. Saturn was universally called the sun throughout the world. In Central America, the Popol Vuh, written circa AD 1600 from much older records, recounts, like a man was the sun when it showed itself. It showed itself when it was born and remained fixed in the sky like a mirror. Certainly it was not the same sun which we see. It is said in their old tales. In arc mode, Saturn would have lost its glow mode coma, but it apparently retained a plasma stream connection to Earth. The sun, and the real sun, lighted part of the edge of Saturn in a crescent, which revolved around Saturn on a daily basis, visually caused by a daily rotation of Earth below Saturn. This stack of planets consisted from top to bottom of Uranus, on its side as today, and Neptune, both hidden by Saturn below them, known in Mesoamerica from earlier times. I suspect that these three planets had been seen together for perhaps 2 million years, initially by Homo erectus. Below Saturn, the following were located from top to bottom. Mercury joined the group in about 14,000 BC. Mars, resident probably since at least 30,000 BC or earlier, and Earth joined the group after 10,900 BC. In 3147 BC, this configuration of standing planets broke apart, with three large planets moving far away from the Sun, and Earth, and Venus, released to overlapping inner orbits. The breakup produced a stupendous flood of the waters, which had been held at the South Polar region due to the gravitational attraction of Saturn for some 7,000 years. The water held at the South Pole was due to the lifting up of the Earth's crust in the Arctic and the sinking toward the Earth's interior in the Antarctic. Flood stories are ubiquitous, found in over 500 independent myths, all with the same coherent details. The survivors included people far inland and those living already on mountain slopes, and apparently the people of the Nile Delta and northern Mesopotamia. The only recourse to a livelihood for many of the survivors was agriculture, which soon sprang up simultaneously in 6 unconnected regions of Earth. The breakup was caused by Jupiter, which had circled the Sun as an inner planet up to that time. Jupiter was subsequently seen receding in the skies, surrounded by a coma visually 3 times larger than the diameter of the Moon today. Below the south pole of Jupiter extended a gigantic plasma outpouring, making it look like Jupiter was resting on a mountain. It was green initially. Above the planet were much smaller, horn-like extensions. The whole of this looked like a person in a mantle, but was also identified as the bull of heaven. Jupiter was taken as the new god, called the Younger. Jupiter retained its massive lower outpouring until it entered the asteroid belt in about 2860 BC, after which the coma reduced in size and changed its shape. After 3070 BC, Mars and Mercury, which had remained in their positions below Saturn, were released when Saturn entered the asteroid belt. The two planets crossed Earth's orbit for about 300 years, overriding the Earth's orbit close to Earth on a 30-year or 15-year average intervals. At those times, Mars was at times brought into plasma contact with Earth, looking like a squat mountain which circled the Earth. The visual effect of the rotation of Earth, with Saturn and Jupiter both disappearing into the ecliptic. Mars was held to be the god in charge of Earth, Horus of the Egyptians. This lasted till about 2750 BC or 2700 BC, after which the irregular visits of Mars ended its elliptical orbit, perhaps rotating away from Earth, an apocytal precession. In the next century, people throughout the world start building pyramids in imitation of the disappeared mountain of Mars, all within 100 years of each other, in Egypt, Mesopotamia, England, China, and the Andes of South America, and many other locations such as Greece and the Balkans. as has been discovered in recent years, although not validated. We have recorded histories of these celestial events, especially in Mesoamerica. There are accurate descriptions of the rings and the number of satellites of Saturn, the cloud bands and satellites of Jupiter, and the scarred surface and satellites of Mars, all dating from antiquity, spanning cultures worldwide. The Egyptians produced schematic images of the original configuration of Saturn and the satellite planets below, and have a record of early close passes by Mars. Mesopotamians also produced images of planets, graphically showing, for example, all the satellites of Jupiter. The Maya, from Olmec sources, have an undated record of the planetary movements from long before 3147 BC, and a dated record of later events which matches what can be gleaned from Eastern Mediterranean sources. The Aztecs produced graphic images of these planets, although anthropomorphized to gods and produced very late. South Sea Islanders have similar records of rings of Saturn. India has similar recollection of these events extending over millions of lines of poetry. The Quiche, Maya, Papa Vu, and pages of the Maya books of the Chilombalam makes casual reference to the period of 13,000 years ago, probably 10,900 BC. One page of the Chilombalam records 7 appearances of the Saturnian planets as far back as perhaps 40,000 years, which can be correlated with atmospheric carbon-14 records dating from 50,000 BP. Over the next 2,500 years, 3147 BC to 685 BC, the inner planets interfered with Earth at intervals, although very infrequently. There were 4 major additional incidents. The damage often was localized in latitude, although, for example, a continuous lightning strike might have encircled the globe in circa 1492 BC, and certainly repeatedly in the 8th and 7th century BC. As recalled by nearly all peoples on all continents, the most terrifying incident, however, happened in 2349 BC, when an alignment with Venus, 20 million miles away at the time, 32,200,000 kilometers, produced an Earth shock in the northern hemisphere, tilting the Earth's axis away from the Sun temporarily and tilting up the equatorial rings of the Earth. Earth at one time had equatorial rings. This was followed perhaps 6 hours later by the arrival of a massive disconnected plasmoid lightning bolt from Venus, which hit the rings almost broadside, followed somewhat later by lesser bolts recorded in Mesoamerica and China. The electric contact with Venus turned the equatorial rings blood red and caused the destruction of the rings. Lightning bolts arc up to the rings from the Earth's ionosphere layers and the lower equatorial plasma toroid, the Van Allen belt. The sky bled for 3 days, and only a single ring remained. Dust continued to rain down for the next 4,000 years until AD 1600. The cleared southern skies, previously obscured by the Earth's rings, revealed a multitude of stars for the first time, most notably the Pleiades, located directly south at midnight, 2 nights after the equinox. The equatorial plasma toroid would have also arced to the surface of Earth, producing months of torrential rains. To humanity, the sea of the Earth's equatorial rings in the south sky, the Absu, had collapsed to Earth, and the event was almost everywhere understood as a second flood of stupendous proportion. The Bible recalls this event as the flood of Noah, but to most peoples, the blood seen in the sky suggested the wholesale slaughter of humanity, and any number of raging goddesses or dragons were assigned to this event in mythology worldwide. Kali, Tiamat, Anath, Sekhmet, Hathor, and much later, Beowulf's Grendel. After 2.5 days, Jupiter appeared again with its previous giant coma and lower mantle, again understood as a mountain, as if risen from the dead. In fact, the rise of the equatorial in the sky made it look as if Jupiter rose up out of the cave previously seen as the shadow of the Earth on the rings. The cave-shaped shadow opened up as the Earth regained its normal inclination and Jupiter rose out of this to a location above it. Jupiter had stopped the dragon from killing additional humans. The event itself remains commemorated as the Day of the Dead, which is why they wear Halloween masks on Halloween. It's so that the spirits don't recognize them, the ones that might want revenge. I believe that's what that's about. And is almost universally associated with the culmination of the Pleiades in autumn. Echoes of the fall of the rings and the surrounding circumstances continued to resound in mythology and, to this day, in the theologies and practices of many religions, especially the resurrection of Jupiter on the third day. Many nations also date the start of all sensible history and their calendars from this event. Strangely, this event is simply not noted by any of the catastrophists. Even Velikovsky remained unaware of it. Interesting. 800 years later, in 1492 BC, Venus again made an electric contact with Earth, causing a crushing, repulsive blow in the east central Pacific. Pacific Islands were wiped clean of any trace of humans, except for the petroglyphs carved on every island thousands of years earlier. Coastal South America and Central America were inundated with water, leaving seawater traces in lakes high up in the Andes, and possibly causing a sudden rise in the coastal range of the Andes by thousands of feet. The blow was followed by an electric arc traveling through the Pacific, the Indian Ocean, and part of India, following a path of increasingly higher latitude into the Mediterranean as the Earth's axis angled back toward the sun. Moses made his escape from Egypt during the turmoil. The event is recalled in mythology as the attack of the monster Typhon, who is struck down by Zeus. The major result of the contact was a 30% increase in the orbit of the Earth. The year went from 273 days to 360 days. Venus probably came no closer than 10 million miles. In this instance, 16 million kilometers. Something else was initiated at this time. The movement of tribes away from devastated areas and failing climates into new regions happened after 1492 BC. Tribes of Central Asia entered India, Anatolia in Greece. Tribes from Asia Minor settled in Italy, as well as at later dates also. People everywhere met strangers and had to cope with new living conditions. This resulted in an expansion of our imagination as a way of coping with these changes. The development of subjective consciousness. Before this time, there was little need to deal with change. The people of Egypt and Mesopotamia, for whom we have records, have remained stagnant in the way of life of their forebears for thousands upon thousands of years. The development of subjective consciousness, as opposed to mere consciousness, was a cultural innovation and a major change which made us humans. Subjective consciousness came to be taught to children by parents, exactly like language is taught. The teaching of subjective consciousness, like the teaching of language, can be readily observed today. Note 5. Another 700 years later, 806 BC to 687 BC, Mars closed in on Earth with repeated electric arc contact at 15-year intervals. A major Earth shock in 747 BC and a minor shock in 686 BC, this last caused by Mercury. Earlier, Mars also interfered with Earth in similar fashion at the close of the early Bronze Age, 1935 to circa 1700 BC, which includes the destruction of Sodom and Gomorrah. Mars came close, perhaps within 40,000 miles of Earth. The interactions, as a result, were completely different from the long-distance shock due to Venus. The destructions of the 8th and 7th century BC were spread over long stretches from Central Asia to the western Mediterranean, and through to Mexico and southern United States, from the Persian Plateau to Greece, in swaths measuring more than 600 miles wide. Hilltop citadels were destroyed by quake-like convulsions, much more extensive than any earthquake, and by massive lightning strikes. Cities and citadels were buried under yards of carbonized material mixed with soil. The soil and burned forests were dropped whenever the traveling lightning bolt paused at a hilltop. Oh, that's pretty crazy. I mean, this lightning bolt traveling around, just going anywhere. These simultaneous destructions have been noted in the archaeological record and include the events of the 8th and 7th century as well as 1935 BC. De Grazia estimates that only 2.5% of the original population of 200 million of the Mediterranean region survived. Bolsena, a city in Italy, was obliterated by a lightning bolt measuring more than 5 miles, 8 kilometers in diameter. If we are to believe Pliny, who presents this from older Etruscan sources, the circular lake at Bolsena is larger than any volcanic caldera. Mars became the next sky god to set a tone for human conduct lasting this day. The destructions of the 8th and 7th century BC obliterated the coastal areas of Greece and coastal Anatolia. The remnant population turned to raiding and became the pirates celebrated in the Iliad as the Egyptian people of the sea. The Iliad reveals that these were no sailors. Warfare and the extraction of tribute also became a way of life for the Assyrians, who plundered from Elam to Egypt. The change in humanity, however, which suddenly brought people up to our current expectations, was an event which happened early in the 7th century BC. In 685 BC, Venus and Mercury blazed as bright as the sun and were seen in the daytime skies, with the sun for 40 days, starting on June 15th. The event was probably an extraordinary plasma outpouring by the sun, brought on by a sudden relocation of Mercury to within the orbit of Venus in the previous year. In July 685 BC, actually the astronomical year minus 685, corrected from 680 BC, Julian in the Eastern Mediterranean chronology. Ah, okay, so that's what the minus is for. It's different. It's astronomical. Okay. Jupiter also erupted with a coma in response to the sun's increased output of plasma, and on July 14th sent a return lightning stroke, a plasmoid bolt headed for the sun. It arrived at the sun on July 25th. The plasmoid, which passed by the Earth at a distance of 30 million miles, 48 million kilometers, was seen in foreshortened form by Asia and Europe. How about that Jupiter taking a swing at the sun? And is depicted in sculptures and illustrations and even on coins. Mediterranean nations thought that Venus or Mercury was struck, the bolt from Zeus which toppled Phaethon from the sun's chariot. Mesoamerica saw the plasmoid at full length as it passed by in the daytime. That would be wild to see something like that, and depicted it correspondingly differently. Their understanding was that Mars was struck. It was called the bundle of flame. Among the Maya, to China this was the celestial dragon, the traditional form of which matches the structure of a plasmoid lightning bolt. Note 6. One could spend a lot of hours on this website here with this. This is amazing. Got a little bit more to go here. As experienced by Earth, the after effect of the 40 days of extreme solar activity was the relocation of the polar axis from Ursa Major to near Ursa Minor, and the delay of spring by some 15 days. In effect, changing the inclination of the polar axis, which is equivalent to rotating the dome of the stars. A new equinox was suddenly established, the aphelion of the Earth's orbit, the location furthest from the Sun, changed, and 120 years of interference by Mars and Mercury came to a sudden halt. It appeared to many that Jupiter, the historical supreme god of antiquity, had again saved mankind from destruction. The change in aphelion had resulted in a cessation of further interactions with Mars. In 670 BC, the Earth's orbit became nearly circular, for unknown reasons, and the Earth was in fact completely removed from any future interference by any of the inner planets. It's probably the Sun's magnetic sphere, I'd imagine. Within 100 years of this event, we see the simultaneous rise of philosophical studies, much as we understand them today, in China, India, Mesopotamia, Anatolia, North Africa, and Rome, well before there was any cultural transmission before the more distant regions on the list. In this list, it appeared to many as if a far greater power beyond the dome of the stars had moved the stars and planets and restarted the universe. For many years of the philosophers, the causes for natural phenomena were now sought elsewhere than in the whims of old planetary gods. With the realization of the existence of a power beyond the planets and stars, we also see the sudden rise of all the modern religions within the span of 100 years. Taoism and Confucianism in China, Jainism and Buddhism in India, with its subsequent influence on Hinduism, Zoroastrianism in Persia, with its influence on Judaism, Mithraism, Christianity, and eventually on Islam. Similar changes seem to be attested to in Mesoamerica, probably dating from 600 BC. Could all this really have happened? Religions have attempted to explain all of it, initially as narrations of the observed events, eventually as metaphors of spiritual states. Science, on the other hand, has spent the last 200 years denying that anything at all ever happened. But look at the histories, what we call myths, of people from regions as diverse as China, Mesopotamia, and Mesoamerica, will reveal that they are in complete agreement with each other. Add to these various myths of the people of India, South America, Africa, Greece, and thousands of others, and a consistent picture of the past emerges, which is not what science tells us. Or fly over regions, for example, of the western United States, and you will soon be convinced that the waves of hills, the conical dumps of wind-borne soil, the distorted folded mountains, the widely varied landscape, cannot possibly be the result of eons of slow movement and metamorphosis of the Earth's crust. The surface of the Earth appears to have been battered and racked convulsively, and widely varied landscape, and recently. Except for geology, which I will not really touch on, the remaining chapters will fill in the details and broaden the scope. 4 major events. The 4 events are the end of the age of the gods and the worldwide flood of 3147 BC, the fall of the Absu, known as the flood of Noah, the blood in the sky, the resurrection of Jupiter, and the first appearance of the Pleiades, 2349 BC, the defeat of Typhon, and the exodus of Moses from Egypt in 1492 BC, and the blazing of Venus and Mercury, and the thunderbolt of Jupiter, which toppled Phaethon in 685 BC. The last few chapters present an excursion into the site plans and iconography of Mesoamerica from about 2000 BC. In these last chapters, you will find that the more closely detailed findings from Mesoamerica will match and often exceed the information available from the Eastern Mediterranean. Well, I'll tell you, this is pretty in-depth and in detail. There's just tons more. I figured it'd be okay to read this because it's free to the public here on his website, Saturniancosmology.org. He's got a lot of stuff on here. It goes into Osiris and new findings, things like the Earth never turned over, at least not completely and certainly not permanent, a nearly impossible notion. I dispute this and discuss the origin of these ideas in the appendix, Polar Relocation. Between 20,000 and 40,000 years ago, humans in Europe entered into a dark and foreboding gloom, lit their animal fat-fueled lamps, and proceeded to produce artistic masterpieces that, when rediscovered millennia later, led Pablo Picasso to declare modern art had invented nothing.
I can't remember.
The subterranean gloom encountered by these early artists was nothing substantially different from their everyday existence on the surface above. Outside these caves, in the open air of a world existing under a chaotic void-like sky, mankind's early ancestors are reported in myth to have lived in a perpetual twilight, devoid of our current sun. Their world, according to many ancient creation accounts, was permeated by a dull glow that provided barely enough light in which to read your average Paleolithic newspaper. Eduardo Cardona, in a chapter in his book Godstar, titled The Age of Darkness, points to comments made by P. Wheeler on the Japanese creation myth that indicate the universal nature of the Kronos-Saturn myth as the main construct in this primordial age of darkness. In the earliest legend with which the recital opens, one recognizes the primal myth, the development from a primordial darkness of chaos. This is the Kronos legend in its 1,000 forms, the father of all mythologies, upon which so many peoples have constructed their cosmogonies, while also providing many direct quotes from various world creation myths, including Jewish literature. Cardona cites H. Osborne, whose work on South American mythology also recognized this primeval age of darkness theme. Some mythological cycles feature a primitive age of darkness before the existence of the sun, when human beings lived in a state of anarchy without the techniques of civilized life. An age before the existence of the sun, as noted by Cardona, which descriptions may leave the reader with the mistaken impression that without the sun there was no light at all. Yet this is not quite the case in mythology, and the same creation myths point to the existence of at least a modest amount of light before the coming of the sun, albeit from a different source to our sun. That source was Saturn, the ancient creator god, in his myriad of forms throughout world mythology, and conclusively identified with the planet Saturn. This celestial Saturn was the very same small and weak raven character in the Eskimo creation myth. The light of our current sun, as a rule, is not essential to life. Microbial life can exist in a sunless environment, as can species of deep sea life. While photosynthesis in vegetation works best in the darker red light spectrum, rather than the harsh and bright ultraviolet light of the sun, so it is not inconceivable that life on Earth, as we know it, could have existed and even flourished in a predominantly nocturnal world, provided there was some form of radiated red spectrum light or energy. Most species of animal, including those now long extinct, exhibit high degrees of nocturnal adaptation. Of all the higher creatures currently inhabiting the Earth, human beings are probably the least adapted to a nocturnal environment. Yet traditional mythologies remember a time of darkness stretching out into an unknown antiquity, a time in which the god Saturn, in all his manifestations, was small and weak, a mere shadow of the creative force he was destined to become. As mankind's first remembered source of light, long before the coming of the sun, Saturn is said to have cast its pale light on a world without seasons and devoid of any means for humans to calculate time. Locked in a stationary post that is reported in mythology to have been at the northern celestial realms, the primordial Saturn seemingly drifted aimlessly through the skies on a chaotic heavenly milieu resembling the ebb and flow of a dark ocean. In this state of affairs that is referred to in the opening verses of Genesis, when darkness was upon the face of the deep, and the Spirit of God moved upon the face of the waters. Our conclusion here is that Saturn's primordial source of a dim, timeless light was a dully glowing sub-brown dwarf star, of which Earth was one of its primary and original satellites, and the Earth was nestled close enough to its original host star to have been enveloped in Saturn's opaque and warming plasma sheath. For humans alive on Earth at this time, there would have been no reference to the greater cosmos, and therefore no reference to any moving celestial object with which they could have marked the passage of time. This was a timeless age in which the dim blue-red light spectrum emanating from Saturn would have cast a dark purple-hued glow over the Earth's surface. This, then, was mankind's purple dawn of creation. Electric universe physicist Wallace Thornhill has suggested that planets orbiting closely to brown dwarf stars would be the best place to go looking for life as we know it outside the solar system. This is a possibility under the EU model because all types of stars, including brown dwarfs, are explained as an electric discharge phenomenon taking place where vast cosmic and electrically live Birkeland currents entwine and pinch down into what is called a Z-pinch, also known as a Bennett pinch. Discovered over 100 years ago, Birkeland currents, or the filamentary gas strings of twisting plasma ropes seen in space, are viewed in the EU model as the galaxy's power lines, feeding electrical power to all of the stars we see in the shining night sky. The eyes of that extinct species of giant, whose bones fill the mounds in America, once gazed on Niagara as ours do now. Abraham Lincoln, in a speech to Congress in 1848, "He who knows nothing is closer to the truth than those whose minds are filled with falsehoods and errors." Thomas Jefferson.
people have a resistance to anything new. It changes a paradigm that has been accepted for a century, basically.
The myth of the hero. The myth of the Queen of Heaven with her long flowing hair. There are 100 universal themes, and all are as old as civilization. The stars are set loose, falling into the void. The land is on fire, mountains split or crumble, rocks explode in flame, all the rivers and seas overflow and sweep across the earth, and the universe becomes a furnace burning everything. The old Norse poem Völuspá recalls the great catastrophe of Ragnarok, the twilight of the gods. When the terrifying wolf Fenrir, its jaws reaching from heaven to earth, brought forth a brood of howling wolves, and the sun became blood red and vanished. If we take the testimony of the ancients as a literal description of actual events, the events would have looked like this. The earth moved in a congregation of planets appearing as immense forms in the sky. Saturn was seen as a huge, stationary body at the celestial pole. Venus appeared squarely in the center of Saturn, and Mars appeared inside of Venus. Jupiter was there also, but hidden by Saturn. The entire system moved through a diffuse cloud of gas, illuminated by our sun. On Earth, this meant that there was no clear distinction of day and night. At an early juncture, gaseous material or dust stretched from Venus towards Saturn. In periods of stability, these radiating streams appeared as a three-pointed and a four-pointed star-like pattern. Over time, the surrounding cloud dissipated. A more clearly defined cycle of day and night began. A bright crescent appeared on Saturn, created by light from our sun. As the Earth rotated on its axis, the crescent visually turned around the polar center. The smaller planet Mars was progressively destabilized and appeared to descend from its central position as it moved closer to the Earth. It returned to the central position then descended still further, growing larger with each descent. When it visually dropped below Venus, a stream of material was seen stretching between Mars and Venus. As it continued to descend, gas and dust began to extend towards Earth. Lateral displacements of both Venus and Mars occurred. Gas, ice, and debris spiraled between the two planets. Eventually, the spiraling material gathered into a band encircling Venus. As the planetary system moved through space, the appearance of the band changed dramatically. The vertical movements of Mars continued. Atmosphere and other material stretching toward the Earth with each descent. Eventually, this material reached the Earth with disastrous effects. When the skies cleared, Mars was seen moving away, a stream of gas and dust stretching upward, with Mars appearing as the apex of the illuminated column. The band encircling Venus gradually opened. The four streams of comet-like material radiated once more from Venus. And material stretching from Mars to Earth retreated up the polar axis. The stable period of Saturn's domination ended with the collapse of the planetary configuration. Jupiter appeared for the first time as Saturn tumbled from its stationary position. These events were followed by a period of great confusion and upheaval. With the displacement of Venus, the band and radiating material collapsed, spiraling between Venus and Mars, then scattering into whirl-like patterns. There was a temporary renewal of the configuration, now visually dominated by Jupiter. And only later did the configuration fall apart. The planet new, more remote equilibrium. And the world slipped into a winter, lasting for years. Icelandic, Aztec, Babylonian. Every ancient culture seems to have remembered an event called the end of the world. The hero was born from the womb of the mother goddess and wore the goddess as a conical crown. He grew a beard. His tongue protruded. He took the form of a dagger or peg plunged into the below. The hero consorted with the goddess, re-entering the goddess' womb as the impregnating seed, then emerging again in a new incarnation, as both the goddess and the hero broke away from their original axial positions. The reborn Mars wore a spiraling sidelock, which was the goddess herself now taking on her serpentine aspect. Hero and goddess engaged in a spiraling dance about the cosmic center. The serpent tail wrapped itself around Venus to produce a band presenting the form of a great eye, so that in its re-entry, Mars became the pupil, or the red apple, of the eye. Saturn's golden age was interrupted by catastrophe, when the enclosure of the gods was sealed shut. The descent of the hero in his dark aspect brought overwhelming clouds and darkness. This was the underworld journey, the archetypal ordeal of the hero, and for the earth, a deluge of fire and water. Then Mars rose out of the waters of the deep to produce the world mountain. The opened eye of Venus formed the rim of the great world wheel, the fiery body of the encircling serpent. watered by the four rivers, this was the land of the gods, resting on the summit of the world mountain, a bright crescent forming the horned peak. Nothing in the silent motions of Venus or Mars, or the gas giants Jupiter and Saturn, will ever explain the thunderbirds, or winged bulls, or flaming dragons, or any of the preposterous ideas our ancestors attached to these powers. It was said of the witch's hair that it could bring rain, hail, wind, and lightning, exactly what ancient nations said of the comet. So too the witch's broom. From Europe to Asia, the clump of grass or straw or feathers, the primitive broom or whisk, was an acknowledged symbol of the comet, the planet Venus. In later Babylonian astronomy, the planet Venus was still remembered as the lamenting star. It was called the witch star. In the Americas, Aztec history remembered Venus as the great feathered serpent, and they called Venus the smoking star, the very phrase they used for a comet. The stargazers of Peru knew Venus as Chasca, the long-haired star, the most common phrase for the comet among ancient peoples. The name for the planets came from the Romans. In unison, Roman poets and historians insisted that in a former time Saturn had ruled as a god-king, producing a paradise on earth. It would be almost impossible to overstate the power of this memory among the different cultures. For the Babylonians, the Hebrews, and the Greeks, the most sacred day of the week was the Sabbath, a ritual remembrance of the lost epoch. And in each of these cultures, this holiest day was the day of Saturn, the Latin Saturnidis, or Saturn's Day, the Celtic day of Ceter, our Saturday. But the Golden Age did not last. In the myths of Quetzalcoatl, of Ra, and of An, of Kronos and of Saturn, the Golden Age does not just come to an end. It ends violently. And with the collapse of the Golden Age arrives the feared comet, the dragon of darkness, the fall into the cosmic night, the clash of the titans. All of the symbols of doomsday. The mountain of Mars became the mooring post of the turning sky. The column of wind or water rising along the world axis. The pillar of the cosmos, with its 4 extensions holding aloft the world wheel. But the ancient paradise did not last. The hero spirited away the goddess, or stole the heart of the universal monarch, who tumbled from the summit of heaven. The Golden Age gave way to the cosmic night, when the hordes of chaos were set loose and the doomsday dragon moved about in the sky, a monster created by the twisting forms of Venus and Mars. It was then that the terrible goddess appeared with wildly disheveled hair, lamenting the death of the universal monarch. In the events that follow, the hero will subdue the dragon or pacify the raging goddess. The universal monarch's own son, Jupiter, will be installed in the center of the sky. But the universal monarch has departed, and with his death comes the end of the Golden Age.
All that remain are fragments of a collective memory, and hidden deep in the human psyche, a sense of something irrevocably lost, and yet eternally yearned for. A paradise when heaven and earth were one. The death of this paradise was the birth of myth. For several decades now, our probes have explored the heavens, returning messages that challenge our long-held assumptions. Where we expected answers, we found mysterious contradictions. But our expectations were based on an intellectual fiction, the idea of the uneventful solar system. Can we allow for the possibility that our ancestors experienced extraordinary cosmic events, events we've simply forgotten? If we allow this idea, even as a possibility, we are inviting a revolution. One discovery will lead inexorably to another, and our entire perspective on the past and the future will be forever changed.
Of Egypt and the rest of these things that he showed us, all from mythology, all from thousands of years ago. These things clearly were seen by civilizations that never talked to each other from the far corners of the earth. It all just clicked together like a three-dimensional jigsaw puzzle in my mind.
A breakthrough for me came when I realized that many different cultures spread around the world use different words, different symbols, different myths to describe precisely the same formations in the sky. The Ouroboros, or celestial serpent biting its tail, for example, occurs on every habitable continent, but it has no ties to the world we now observe. Like all of the archetypes, it is part of an alien sky. a cosmic column rising to the center of the sky, holding aloft the wheel of heaven. And much more than a wheel, because this was the revolving cosmic temple, the city of the gods, the kingdom of heaven, always resting on the cosmic column. Then there's the image of the four rivers or pathways radiating from the center of the sky out to the boundary, the rim of the wheel. The simplest forms lead you invariably to the full story of world mythology. The hero's journey unfolds as the story of the wheel's axle. The mother goddess finds her identity in the star at the summit.
Garb. His sword and battle axe are resting next to him. The length of the skeleton is 4.5 yards, and the teeth of the big man are measured at 6.5 inches long and 2 broad. End quote. Adding to the evidence verifying the existence of giants are numerous gigantic fossilized footprints. For example, an imprint of a human foot 80 centimeters or 2.5 feet in length has been unearthed in Tanzania. Similar footprints of a slightly smaller size, about 50 centimeters or 1.5 feet, were found in the Nevada desert, left approximately 250 million years ago. A series of handprints was found next to traces of dinosaurs near a village in Turkmenistan. The height of the giant that left them is estimated at about 5 meters, almost 16.5 feet, and lived 150 million years ago. A human tooth 5 times larger than an ordinary man's tooth was found in Hong Kong in 1935. A 60 centimeter or 2 foot high human skull with 2 rows of teeth was found in Alaska in 1950. And a 50-foot long petrified human skeleton, that's 15 meters, folks, was found in Mongolia in 1999. The sheer plethora of evidence allows us to state unequivocally that giants did indeed once exist. But whether they were a single people who settled all over the earth or belonged to different races, this is a question which scientists have yet to unambiguously answer. But if giants really existed, and not only in myth and legend, then it stands to reason that other traces of their lives should also exist. For example, architectural structures and other such objects. In the opinion of a number of scientists, the numerous megalithic objects that have been discovered all over the Earth serve as proof of the prior existence of giants. Even in our time, with modern technology, it is extremely difficult to build such monumental objects, and tens or even hundreds of thousands of years ago, without some kind of mechanical lifting mechanisms, it seems that it would have been virtually impossible. And yet, they exist. This is the famous Baalbek Terrace located in Lebanon near Beirut. 3 huge stone slabs, each weighing about 800 tons, are embedded in its base. The plates are identical and fit together so seamlessly that one cannot even insert the blade of a knife between them. Researchers calculated that to install just one such stone block, 21 meters wide and 54 meters long, would require the simultaneous effort of at least 35,000 people. Who, how, and why did they do it? Handwritten Arabic treatises say that the structure was built as a temple of Jupiter and that the giant beings built it on the orders of King Nimrod just after the flood. The ancient city of Teotihuacan, the City of Gods, is located 31 miles from Mexico City and is an entire complex of huge stone blocks. According to the most common historical version of events, the city was built by giants to turn people into gods. Its layout resembles a model of the solar system. From the central temple, which embodies the sun, at appropriate distances are the planet temples, even including Pluto, which modern astronomers only discovered in 1930. This means that the inhabitants of this site somehow already knew a great deal of astronomy, even at that ancient time. Regarding objects that giants might have built, scholars also include the Egyptian Sphinx, the English Stonehenge, the stone figures of Easter Island, and the Tibetan City of the Gods. Not only are these structures themselves amazing, but also their geometrical connection with each other. For example, a line drawn from the Tibetan City of Gods to the Egyptian Sphinx, if continued, leads directly to Easter Island, and another line from the City of Gods through the Mexican pyramids also goes to Easter Island. These two lines delineate 1/4 of the Earth's surface, and a line drawn from the City of the Gods to Stonehenge divides this quarter exactly in half. And what about modern people who are giants? One view is that the life and then disappearance of these giants is related to some cosmic cataclysm. There is evidence that hundreds of millions of years ago, a huge asteroid approached our planet, and the dimensions of this asteroid exceeded those of our present-day moon. It's postulated that it became a satellite of the Earth, and because of this, the gravity in our planet was significantly weakened. It was then that the giants appeared and developed a fairly advanced civilization. Hundreds of thousands or even millions of years later, this satellite descended from its orbit and disintegrated, its debris falling to the Earth. Survivors of the disaster, through mutation and adaptation, decreased in size as the gravity on the planet had suddenly increased dramatically. In addition, the ozone layer of the atmosphere decreased sevenfold, increasing the negative impact of solar radiation. Now, a smaller body meant less total surface area and thus a lesser exposure to the sun's radiative effects. Some researchers have ascertained that before the catastrophe, the Earth's atmosphere contained 1.5 times as much oxygen as now. Large animals thrive with more oxygen, and this helps explain the fossil record of all the giant animals and plants characteristic of that time, which obviously would also be beneficial to giant humanoids. After the disaster, the size of the giants gradually decreased. According to some well-known anthropologists, such as Christopher Bohm and Franz Weidenreich, before the explosion and fall of the satellite asteroid, the Asuras, inhabitants of the legendary continent of Lemuria, reached a height of 50 meters or 160 feet. As a result of the catastrophe, the continent divided, and the once united race of giants were now isolated from each other. The successors of the Asuras were 18 meters tall, that's about 60 feet, and their successors 6 meters, or about 20 feet tall. As a result of these new environmental conditions in the world, the giants in many areas died out. But in some areas they managed to survive, at least until the 16th century. Of course, such a theory runs counter to the teachings of Darwin, but it is this theory that most plausibly explains the existence of the giants. What do you think? Let's discuss this fascinating topic in the comments under the video. Thank you.
Of the ancient comet fears is going to run into the work of Immanuel Velikovsky, the controversial theorist who suggested that, well, there's a reason for the fears of comets around the world. We experienced this horrific cometary catastrophe. The world was devastated by a comet just a few thousand years ago. And Velikovsky went further. He said that not that long ago, planets appeared in the sky with comet-like attributes. In particular, he named the planet Venus as the great comet of antiquity. Both Wal Thornhill and I disagreed with many components of Velikovsky's reconstruction, but we also felt that Velikovsky had nailed certain principles that can help us to understand the early cultures. In particular, Velikovsky was correct in naming the planet Venus as the Great Comet. And the cometary language of Venus goes far beyond anything that Velikovsky himself published. In every corner of the world, the language of the comet and the language of Venus are identical. Venus as serpent or dragon. Venus as torch of the sky. Venus as long-haired star. Venus as bearded star. The Sumerian goddess Inanna was identified as Venus. She was the Lady of Life. But in her terrible aspect, she became a dragon-like flame in the sky. texts say, like a dragon, you have deposited venom on the land, raining the fanned fire down upon the nation. Inanna became a roaring storm. She devastated the land. Mankind comes before you in fear and trembling at your tempestuous radiance, the texts say. Inanna's Babylonian counterpart Ishtar was also identified as Venus. She was the shining torch of heaven and earth. Furious and irresistible onslaught. I rain down like flames, the goddess announces. The Egyptian goddess Sekhmet has the same attributes. She takes the form of the fiery Uraeus serpent. She becomes a flame of fire in her tempest, a star scattering its flame and fire. Sekhmet herself says, "The fear of me is in their hearts, and the awe of me is in their hearts." No one at all can approach her, the coffin texts say. The streams behind her are flames of fire. The astonishing fact is that goddesses everywhere exhibit this terrifying and cometary aspect. The Canaanite Inat, the Hindu Kali and Durga, the Greek Aphrodite, Athena, Medusa, and countless others. And of course you can add numerous counterparts in the New World, from the Incan goddess Chaska to the Aztec goddess Xochiquetzal to the legendary Nokomis of North American Indian tribes. The serpent or dragon is an unexplained mythical archetype. There's nothing like it anywhere in the biological world. And yet the same recurring features will be found in cultures the world over. The dragon's disheveled hair and shaggy beard. Its knotted aspect, and its worldwide appearance as entwined twins. Its fiery or lightning-like emanations, and its effusive feathers. In all of the ancient serpent or dragon images, it's the luminous, filamentary, braided, spiraling, metamorphosing, and destructive aspects that stand out. The very traits of high-energy plasma discharge. The attributes of these mythic monsters remain unexplained only until we see the hairy and feathery attributes of the electric arc in the laboratory. We see precisely the same thing in enhanced images of the comet's tail. And we see the same thing in the comet-like discharges of distant nebulas. Gases in a vacuum don't behave this way, but electrified plasma does.
And now there's
Welcome to Space News from the Electric Universe, brought to you by the Thunderbolts Project at thunderbolts.info. On this series, we have recently presented reports that challenge some of the bedrock beliefs about the history of our planet, our solar system, and the universe as a whole. When it comes to our own world, the fundamental belief system shaping all of modern geology and astronomy is uniformitarianism, or the notion that changes in nature happen incrementally over eons of time. It's the position of the Thunderbolts Project that evidence from increasingly fine data in numerous specialized fields only confirms the hypothesis of recent catastrophic events on our planet and in the inner solar system. In this episode, Bishop Nicholas Sykes explores the question, is our history far different from that which official science proposes?
My previous videos in this series have considered the serious possibility of the science of the modern schools being wrong in areas of cosmology and physics about such diverse topics and phenomena as black holes, the Oort cloud, the composition and genesis of comets, the model of magnetic reconnection, the way the sun and other stars are powered, and Einsteinian relativity, including its restriction of the speed of gravity to the supposed maximum possible speed of electromagnetic radiation in vacuo. Science, however, is a broad subject. Indeed, one might adduce from the above, and far from exhaustive catalogue of contradictions that my colleagues and I are claiming that the whole enterprise of science is flawed in principle. It is necessary to deny that deduction categorically. In my view, what we are claiming is that human intellectual and moral error have, especially during the last 100 years, brought about grave flaws in that intellectual structure that in the second decade of the 21st century is being presented in the schools and in the media as settled science. One basic mistake is to ignore the reality that any science may only be regarded meaningfully as settled, and only tentatively at that when its various theories continue to be open to being tested by experiment and observation. Any science theory claiming that further investigation into it is closed has by that claim unsettled itself. If some new observational or experimental discovery is considered to disturb what was formerly regarded as settled, then the true scientific method will seek to find further resources of observation or experimentation to investigate the issue. Too often one perceives those in their settled science castles pulling up the drawbridges as if new observations, experiments, and science models must be science's enemies, rather than having the possibilities of bringing health and renewal to the great structure of science and science education that our generation is called to bequeath to the future. One of the most long-standing such settled science castles is that model of the Earth's history that may be referred to as Lyellian uniformitarianism. Charles Lyell, 1797 to 1875, who preceded Charles Darwin, 1809 to 1882, and upon whose thought Darwin came to draw, accepting, one supposes, the Newtonian impression of a solar system that had run like clockwork for all of history, laid down the view that whatever past changes had ever been brought about in nature would have been essentially no different than what was observable in the present. And it seemed obvious that in the present time, natural changes were slow. Lyell's model of natural change in course of time overtook older models of catastrophic change accepted by many researchers, and particularly by Georges Cuvier, 1769 to 1832. In more recent times, models of punctuated evolution have been proposed by Stephen Jay Gould and others, but the conditions driving such punctuation are still assumed to have occurred only in periods of time before humans existed. It is therefore by no means altogether surprising that the electric universe model, which envisages catastrophic changes not only before the advent of man, or even only in man's prehistory, but actually within the historical period, has found the drawbridges being drawn up against its advance into the halls of academia. Catastrophe that is long ago and far away is one thing, but the possibility of catastrophe within human history is quite another. Once we accept that, who knows what the geological clock might begin to reveal about our own history, or indeed suggest about the future. Notwithstanding all this, the model of Lyellian uniformitarianism, if we are prepared to be scientific about the matter, should, in the name of science, be subjected to fresh scrutiny. Might not the EU model, which does encompass recent catastrophic change, be a means of renewing the science of our current geological and evolutionary outlook? For the science story of our own day, sticking to a centuries-old uniformitarianism has given us the mantra of no natural catastrophes for billions of years. The electric universe account, on the other hand, tells that such catastrophes must have occurred even within the lifespan of humanity. Let us, at the very least, put the two accounts head to head, ponder the matter, and learn.
For continuous updates on space news from the electric universe, stay tuned to thunderbolts.info.
An ancient tradition ascribed the establishment of moon worship to Adam, the first man. The medieval Arab scholar Abu Bakr wrote, "They, the Sabians, say that Adam was born from male and female, just like the rest of mankind. But they honored him greatly and said that he had come from the moon, that he was the prophet and apostle of the moon, and that he had exhorted the nations that they should serve the moon. They also related about Adam that when he had left the moon and proceeded from the area of India towards Babylonia, that he brought many wonders with him. The Adamites, the antediluvian men, were most probably not the first human beings on the planet, even admitting that by expulsion from the Garden of Eden is allegorized a catastrophe which quite destroyed mankind prior to the deluge. It is impossible to declare that it was the first catastrophe. It depends on the memory of the peoples which catastrophe they consider as the act of creation. Human beings, rising from some catastrophe, bereft of memory of what had happened, regarded themselves as created from the dust of the earth. All knowledge about the ancestors, who they were, and in what interstellar space they lived, was wiped away from the memory of the few survivors. The Talmudic rabbinical tradition believes that before Adam was created, the world was more than once inhabited and more than once destroyed. It was at the end of the first age, symbolized by the expulsion of man from the blessed Garden of Eden, that the moon lost its brightness. It was not just a single human pair. The tradition ascribes to Adam the invention of 70 languages. Hebrew mythology assigns to the period preceding Adam's expulsion different geophysical and biological conditions. The sun shone prominently on the earth, and the Garden of Eden, placed in the east, was, it must be conceived, under perpetual rays of the dawn. The earth was not watered by rain, but mist, ascending from the ground, condensed as dew upon the leaves. The plants looked only to the earth for nourishment. Man was of exceedingly great stature. The dimensions of man's body were gigantic. His appearance was unlike that of later man. His body was overlaid with a horny skin. But a day came, and the celestial illumination ceased. The sun had grown dark the instant Adam became guilty of disobedience. The flames of the ever-turning sword terrified Adam. Genesis 3:24. In another legend it is told that the celestial light shone a little in the darkness, and then a celestial light ceased, to the consternation of Adam. The illumination of the first period never returned. The sky that man was used to see never appeared before him again. The firmament is not the same as the heavens of the first day. The day of Genesis, as I have already noted, is said to be equal to 1,000 years. It was after the fall of man, according to Hebrew tradition, that the sun set for the first time. The first time Adam witnessed the sinking of the sun, he was seized with anxious fears. All the night he spent in tears. When day began to dawn, he understood that what he had deplored was but the course of nature. It was also then the seasons began. That's pretty good lyrics. This is told in the following story. Adam noticed that the days were growing shorter and feared lest the world be darkened. But after the winter solstice, he saw that the days grew longer again. The earth also underwent changes. Independent before, she was hereafter to wait to be watered by the rain from above. The variety of species diminished. Man, according to Hebrew legends, decreased in size. There was a vast difference between his later and his former state, between his supernatural size then and his shrunken size now. He also lost his horny skin. the whole of nature altered its ways. References:
Athanasius Kircher, Taurus Babelsci Varkonatologia Amsterdam, 1679, p. 134. The very angels and the celestial beings were grieved by the transgression of Adam. The moon alone laughed, wherefore God obscured her light. Ginsberg Legends I, 80. Ginsberg Legends I,
79 and Ginsberg Legends 76. Worship of the moon. Because of its size, and also because of the events which accompanied the first appearance of the moon, many ancient peoples regarded the moon as the chief of two luminaries. The sun was of smaller importance than the moon in the eyes of the Babylonian astrologers. The Assyrians and the Chaldeans referred to the time of the moon god as the oldest period in the memory of the people, before other planetary gods came to dominate the world ages. The moon was a supreme deity. Such references are found in the inscriptions of Sargon II, circa 720 BC, and
Nabonidus,
circa 550 BC. The Babylonian Sin, the moon, was a very ancient deity. Mount Sinai owes its name to Sin. The moon, appearing as a body larger than the sun, was endowed by the imagination of the peoples with a masculine role, while the sun was assigned a feminine role. Many languages reserved a masculine name for the moon. It was probably when the moon was removed to a greater distance from the earth and became smaller to observers on the earth that another name, usually feminine, came to designate the moon in most languages. Bezold in Baal was considered to be the father of the sun god Shamash, Utu, and was commonly addressed as Father Sin, Sumerian and Babylonian. Psalms 1909. F. Kumant noted the prominence of Sin in the earliest historical period in Babylonia and found it remarkable that at first the primacy was assigned to the moon. Astrology and Religion Among the Greeks and Romans, page 124. The late Assyrio-Babylonian cult of the moon. According to the Dabistan, a Persian work of early Islamic times, the Kaaba of Mecca was originally dedicated to the worship of the moon. On moon worship, among the ancient Arabs, also
Touch Sinaitische Inschriften Zeitschrift des Deutsches Morgenländisches Gesellschaft 3, 1849, p. 202, and Oshanda Vorweilerische Religion der Araber Ibid 7, 1853, p. 483. Cf. I. Golddigger, Mythology Among the Hebrews and Its Historical Development, 1877.
The Greeks regarded the moon as of greater importance than the sun. The sun's subordination to the moon is a remarkable feature of early Greek myth. Helios was not even an Olympian, but a mere Titan's son, Hyperions. And this is a long one. C.R. Markham, London, 1873, describes sacrifices to the moon by the natives of Peru in the 16th century. Also, the Indians of Vancouver Island assigned greater importance to the moon than the sun. E.B. Taylor, Primitive Culture, 1929, as did several tribes in Brazil. See Sargon's display inscription, since distant days of the age of Nanaru. A cuneiform text describes the first appearance of the moon, when the gods fixed the crescent of the moon to cause the new moon to shine forth to create the month, the new moon, which was created in heaven with the majesty in the midst of heaven arose. R.W. Rogers, Cuneiform Parallels of the Old Testament, 1912. J. Louis, The Late Assyrio-Babylonian Cult of the Moon and Its Culmination in the Time of Nabonidus. Quotes Philochorus as having Macrobius Saturnalia 8, quotes Philochorus as having said that men offer sacrifices to the moon, dressed as women, and women dressed as men, because the moon is thought to be both male and female. Macrobius was quite the author. I think I want to get some of his works. They look fascinating to me. To read something someone wrote thousands of years ago, it's been dead for that long, that he can talk to you right in this book, to just you. That's what's great about books. Is that where we get the word microbe from, or macro, or both? I don't know, I'm just guessing. You know, I noticed on the video of mine, Worship of Saturn, if I'm not mistaken, that is claiming that Osiris was swathed to look like Saturn, and therefore all the dead were to be swathed like that. And that's where we get the mummy. So they were emulating Saturn's look. And it does look like it's been wrapped in bandages. It's very interesting. And that pretty much cinches it. They had to have seen it. How else would they know? Oh, a little side note, I got this picture from Ted Holden and this video right here. And that sure looks like a little girl to me. If this is truly a picture from the Mars rover, then humans are definitely on Mars. And here's the before and after pictures. She's there, and then at some point later, she's gone. That is very telling. I've always said I need to see that one picture that puts it over the top and makes it impossible to deny. And this picture, for me, is that picture. In 2016, I took up painting. It's something that I always wanted to do, I just never did. I got a couple of interesting pictures here. Now, I'm a lousy artist, so I'm not trying to show it off. I'm just showing a strange coincidence. I painted this picture right here, not knowing at all that water was there, for one, and that Thoth was synonymous with the moon. I did not know that at the time. And that people apparently, or supposedly, allegedly, came from the moon. See, I have an embryo there inside the moon. That's what I was trying to make it look like anyway. I know my artist work is lousy, but I was just a beginner. I'm still a beginner, but it's something I really enjoy. And the strangest one of all, now don't look at my lousy galaxy. I was experimenting with sponges. I tried to make a galaxy with sponges. And it's not the galaxy that's interesting. I snapped a picture of it to play with the contrast. And look at this. You see that face right there? That's creepy. I don't know if that could be a coincidence. Did I capture some creature? It's pretty freaky. Yeah, I just can't see it being a coincidence of light and shadow. I don't know. It's not in the painting. It's just in the photograph. It came from the flash. Whoever he is, he looks like he's got a mustache, and he's sore.
work for NASA, most of them, 99% of them, are completely oblivious.
Yeah.
They're like I was back when I worked for Cronkite. I couldn't imagine there'd been a hidden agenda for NASA then. If you told me, I would have said, oh, come on, you're nuts.
Yeah.
But some of those people, a percentage, they have figured it out.
Yep. And they are reading your books.
And well, maybe they are. Maybe they've just figured it out on their own. But what they've done that we have found is they have left clues going back to the Apollo era in the Apollo data, like in the film. Remember I talked about the DAC camera films?
Yeah.
They hid messages for us in the splicings between the films. Coded messages left by NASA people in 1969, 1970.
Give a shout, special thanks to Todd Borneman for your generous donation. I don't get many. Thanks for helping the cause. The Earth without the Moon. The period when the Earth was moonless is probably the most remote recollection of mankind. Democritus, Anaxagoras, taught that there was a time when the earth was without the moon. Aristotle wrote that Arcadia in Greece, before being inhabited by the Hellenes, had a population of Pelasgians, and that these aborigines occupied the land already before there was a moon in the sky above the earth. For this reason, they were called Proselines. Apollonius of Rhodes mentioned the time when not all orbs were yet in the heavens, before the Danai and Deucalion races came into existence, and only the Arcadians lived, of whom it is said that they dwelt on the mountains and fed on acorns before there was a moon. Plutarch wrote In Roman questions, there were Arcadians of Evander's following, the so-called pre-lunar people. Similarly, wrote Ovid, the Arcadians are said to have possessed their land before the birth of Jove, and the folk is older than the moon. Hippolytus refers to a legend that Arcadia brought forth Poliscus, of greater antiquity than the moon. Lucian, in his Astrology, says that the Arcadians affirm in their folly that they are older than the moon. Censorinus also alludes to the time in the past when there was no moon in the sky. Some allusions to the time before there was a moon may be found also in the scriptures. In Job 25:5, the grandeur of the Lord who makes peace in the heights is praised, and the time is mentioned before there was a moon. And it did not shine. Also in Psalm 72:5 it is said, Thou wasn't feared since the time of the sun and before the time of the moon, a generation of generations. A generation of generations means a very long time. Of course, it is of no use to counter this psalm with the myth of the first chapter of Genesis, a tale brought down from exotic and later sources. The memory of a world without a moon lives in oral tradition among the Indians. The Indians of Bogota, highlands in the eastern Cordilleras of Colombia relate some of their tribal reminiscences to the time before there was a moon. In the earliest times, when the moon was not yet in the heavens, say the tribesmen of the Chibchas, there are currently 3 theories of the origin of the moon. 1. The moon originated at the same time as the Earth, being formed substantially from the same material, aggregated and solidifying. 2. Was formed not in the vicinity of the Earth, but in a different part of the solar system, and was later captured by the Earth. 3. The moon was originally a portion of the terrestrial crust, and was torn out, leaving behind the bed of the Pacific. All 3 theories claim the presence of the moon on an orbit around the Earth for billions of years. Mythology may supply each of these views with some support. Genesis 1, for the first view. The birth of Aphrodite from the sea, for the third view. Aphrodite's origin in the disruption of Uranus, and also the violence of sin, the Babylonian moon, seems to support the second view. Since mankind on both sides of the Atlantic preserved the memory of a time when the Earth was without a moon, the first hypothesis, namely of the moon originating simultaneously with the Earth and in its vicinity, is to be excluded, leaving the other 2 hypotheses to compete between themselves. We have seen that the traditions of diverse peoples offer corroborative testimony to the effect that in a very early age, but still in the memory of mankind, no moon accompanied the Earth. Since human beings already peopled the Earth, it is improbable that the moon sprang from it. There must have existed a solid lithosphere, not a liquid Earth. Thus, while I do not claim to know the origin of the moon, I find it more probable that the moon was captured by the Earth. Such an event would have occurred as a catastrophe. If the moon's formation took place away from the Earth, its composition may be quite different. There is no evidence to suggest whether the moon was a planet, a satellite of another planet, or a comet at the time of its capture by the Earth. Whatever atmosphere it may have had was pulled away by the Earth, by other contacting bodies, or dissipated in some other way. Since the time the moon began to accompany the Earth, It underwent the influence of contacts with comets and planets that passed near the Earth in subsequent ages. The mass of the moon being less than that of the Earth, the moon must have suffered greater disturbances in cosmic contacts. During these contacts, the moon was not carried away. This is due to the fact that no body more powerful than the Earth came sufficiently close to the moon to take it away from the Earth for good. But in the contacts that took place, the moon was removed repeatedly from one orbit to another. The variations in the position of the moon can be read in the variations in the length of the month. The length of the month repeatedly changed in subsequent catastrophic events. And for this, there exists a large amount of supporting evidence. In these later occurrences, the moon played a passive role, and Zeus in the Iliad advised it, Aphrodite, to stay out of the battle in which Athena and Ares, Venus and Mars, that I pronounced wrong for the whole video, were the main contestants. What I'm thinking is when Earth was a satellite of Saturn, of course, the moon probably wasn't, there was a time when it wasn't with the Earth, maybe not even with the planets. And it sounds like there might have been a time when the moon was very close to the Earth and still molten, which if that was the case for a while, it could have acted as the big masculine body that was observed in the last episode. So that's a possibility, and the Earth captured the moon, like it said, and it slowly receded, or something maybe pulled it. There's so many things that could have happened, but delving down into it and trying to figure it out is fascinating. All right, references.
Hippolytus, Refutatio Omnium Heresium VE. Aristotle FR, 591 ed. V.
Plutarch, Moralia, translated by F.C. Babbitt, section 76.
Fasti, translate by Sir J. Fraser, 290. Refutatio Omnium Heresium VE.
Lucian Astrology, translated by A.M. Harmon, 1936.
Liber de Di Natali 19, also Scholium on Aristophanes' Clouds, line 398. Ed von Humboldt, VUEs Des. Cordilleras 1816, English translate researches concerning the institutions and monuments of the ancient inhabitants of America 1814, Volume 1, p. 87, cf. H. Fisher in Montana World, 1930.
In addition to the sources cited above, the Nihongi Chronicles of Japan transactions proceeding on the Japanese society, which recount how heaven and earth produced the moon god. The Kalevala of the Fens recalls a time when the moon was placed in orbit.
Cf. The effects of such an event on the Earth's rotation calculated by H. Gerstenkorn in Zeitschrift für Astrophysik 36, 1955, p. 245. Arrhenius.
Two alternatives for the history of the moon. Science 165, 1969. S.F. Singer and L.W. Banderman. Where was the moon formed? Science, 1970. The moon was formed independently of the Earth and later captured, presumably by a three-body interaction, and these events were followed by the dissipation of the excess energy through tidal friction in a close encounter. More recently, a study of lunar paleotides has shown that the moon could not have been formed in orbit around the Earth. A.J. Anderson, Lunar Paleotides and the Origin of the Earth-Moon System. The Moon and the Planets, 1978. Because of a certain degree of instability in the Sun-Earth-Moon system, the planetary origin and capture of the Moon by the Earth becomes a strong dynamic possibility. R. Mackenzie and Sebehe, forget it. Stability of the Sun-Earth-Moon system. The Astronomical Journal, 1977.
Cf. U. B. Cherniak on recent lunar atmosphere, Nature, 273, the 15th of June, 1978, pp.
497. The author found strong theoretical evidence of a considerable atmosphere on the moon during the greater part of its history. Yeah, I remember reading about that before. I think it's trying to grow one now. Wow, that was a longer reference than the article. I always found it odd that the Earth was this planet of beautiful color with an atmosphere and water, and the moon, which is in the sun's comfort zone too, so-called, is barren and dead. I never quite got that. If we were both in the same place at the same time, we should look similar. I like going through the references. Astronomical knowledge before the deluge. A civilization was destroyed, the real value of which is incalculable. Hebrew tradition estimates that the population of the antediluvial world amounted to millions. Adam is said to have invented 70 languages. Cain, his son, built cities and monuments and ruled over kings. They were representatives of generations. According to Hebrew legends, the deluge and its time had already been predicted by Enoch, and even more ancient generations were astronomical calculations predicting the catastrophe. This might have been the knowledge of months and of years and periods of comets that the remote generations had acquired. It was in this celestial harmony and disharmony that the secrets of the upheavals were conceived to lie. The science about the times to which the calamity could return and fall on our earth was cultivated among populations. They had a vivid remembrance of days of misfortune or of lucky escape. It is told about the children of Seth, the son of Adam, that they were the inventors of that peculiar sort of wisdom which is concerned with the heavenly bodies and their order, that their inventions were not lost before they were sufficiently known. They made 2 pillars upon Adam's prediction that the world was to be destroyed, at one time by the force of fire, and on another time by the quantity of water. One was of brick, the other of stone, and they inscribed their discoveries. For all the 243 years during which the influence of Enoch prevailed. In the story of Enoch's ascension, it is said that he predicted the disaster. Enoch was driven into the sky by a fiery chariot driven by fiery chargers. That's interesting. The days thereafter, the kings who had turned back sent messengers to inquire into the fate of the men who had refused to separate themselves from Enoch, for they had noted the number of them. They found stone and great hailstones in the spot from where Enoch had risen. What was that all about? When they removed the stones, they discovered all of the bodies who had remained with Enoch. He alone was not among them. He was high in heaven. What the Agata means to tell is that a human being, and one gifted with the greatest wisdom concerning the heavenly bodies and their order, was brought away in a fiery storm which killed many, brought snow and meteorites, and which had been predicted by the one who disappeared. Some exact knowledge of the revolution of the bodies in the sky is ascribed here to the antediluvian generations. It is said that the real period of grace endured not for 7 days, but for 120 years. During this time, the flood was over mankind as a threat. Sanhedrin 108b. Josephus, Antiquities of the Jews, 2. 8, borrowed by Yasher Bereshit.
Genesis 5:24.
Is live in Hernando, Mississippi, where there's been spottings of a cougar and away from where a local man rolled his cell phone video on what some say is a cougar. Right back with a lot of reports.
Look at this picture here of the face on Mars. The left side. What does that look like to you? Kind of looks like a lizard to me. You see the lizard eye there? The slit? That's digital. And then they switch it over to analog and you get this. It's kind of weird. A brighter moon. Many traditions persist that at some time in the past the moon was much brighter than it is now, and larger in appearance than the sun. In many rabbinical sources it is stated that the sun and the moon were equally bright at first. The same statement was made to D. Sahagan by the Aborigines of the New World. The sun and the moon had equal light in the past. At the other end of the world, the Japanese asserted the same. The Nihongi Chronicle says that in the past, the radiance of the moon was next to that of the sun in splendor. Traditions of many peoples maintain that the moon lost a large part of its light and became much dimmer than it had been in earlier ages. In order that the sun and the moon should give off comparable light, the moon must have had an atmosphere with a huge albedo, refracting power, or it must have been much closer to the Earth. In the latter case, the moon would have appeared larger than the sun. In fact, the Babylonian astronomers computed the visible diameter of the sun as only 2/3 of the visible diameter of the moon, which makes a relation of 4 to 9 for the illuminating surfaces. This measure surprised modern scholars, who are aware of the exactness of the measurements made by the Babylonian astronomers, and who reason that during the eclipse one can easily observe the approximate quality of the visible disks. And there's your references. The worship of the moon. Because of its size, and also because of the events which accompanied the first appearance of the moon, many ancient peoples regarded the moon as the chief of the two luminaries. The sun was of smaller importance than the moon in the eyes of the Babylonian astrologers. The Assyrians and the Chaldeans referred to the time of the moon god as the oldest period in the memory of the people, before other planetary gods came to dominate the world ages. The moon was the supreme deity. Such references are found in the inscriptions of Sargon II, circa -720, and Nabonidus, circa -550. The Babylonian Sin, the moon, was a very ancient deity. Mount Sinai owes its name to Sin. The moon, appearing as a body larger than the sun, was endowed by the imagination of the peoples with a masculine role, while the sun was assigned a feminine role. Many languages reserved a masculine name for the moon. It was probably when the moon was removed to a greater distance from the earth and became smaller to observers on the earth that another name, usually feminine, came to designate the moon in most languages. See Bazold in Baal. In Babylonian cosmology, the moon god Sin, Nana, was considered to be the father of the sun god Shamash, Utu, and was commonly addressed as Father Sin. S. Langdon, Sumerian and Babylonian Psalms, 1909. F. Cumont noted the prominence of Sin in the earliest historical period in Babylonia and found it remarkable that at first the primacy was assigned to the moon. astrology, and religion among the Greeks and Romans. The late Assyrio-Babylonian cult of the moon, according to Dabistan, a Persian work of early Islamic times, the Ka'bah of Mecca was originally dedicated to the worship of the moon, on moon worship among the ancient Arabs. Also, the Greeks regarded the moon as of greater importance than the sun. The sun's subordination to the moon is a remarkable feature of early Greek myth. Helios was not even an Olympian, but a mere Titan's son. C.R. Markham describes sacrifices to the moon by the natives of Peru in the 16th century. Also, the Indians of Vancouver Island assigned greater importance to the moon than the sun, as did several tribes in Brazil. The deluge. The scriptural deluge is regarded by historians and critical exegetes as a legendary product. The legend of a universal deluge is in itself a myth and cannot be anything else. It is most nakedly and unreservedly mythological. The tradition of a universal deluge is told by all ancient civilizations, and also by races that never reached the ability to express themselves in written symbols of a language. It is found all over the world, on all continents, on the islands of the Pacific and Atlantic, everywhere. Usually it is explained as a local experience carried from race to race by word of mouth. The work of collating such material has repeatedly been done, and it would only fatigue the reader were I to repeat these stories as told in all parts of the world, even in the places never visited by missionaries. The rest of the collected traditions are also not identical in detail, and are sometimes very different in their setting from the Noah story, but all agree that Earth was covered to the mountaintops by water of the deluge coming from above, and that only a few human beings escaped death in the flood. The stories are often accompanied by details about a simultaneous cleavage of the earth. In pre-Columbian America, the story of a universal flood was very persistent. The First World Age was called Antenacia, or the age that was brought to its end by a universal deluge. This is written and illustrated in the ancient codices of the Mexicans and was narrated to the Spaniards who came to the new continent. The natives of Australia, Polynesia, and Tanzania, discovered in the 17th century, related almost identical traditions. Clay tablets with inscriptions concerning the early ages of the deluge were found in Mesopotamia. Their similarity to the biblical account and the story of the Chaldean priest Berosus, who lived in the Hellenistic age, caused a great sensation at the end of the last century and the beginning of the current one. On this sensational discovery was based the sensational pamphlet Babel und Bible by Frederick Delitzsch, 1902, who tried to show in that the Hebrews had simply borrowed this story, along with many others, from the Babylonian store of legends. But if here and there the story of the flood could be said to have been borrowed by the scriptural writer from the Babylonians, and by some natives from the missionaries, in other cases, no such explanation could be offered. The indigenous character of the stories in many regions of the world makes the borrowing theory seem very fragile. Geologists see vestiges of diluvial rains all over the world. Folklorists hear the story of a universal flood wherever folklore is collected. Historians read of a universal flood in American manuscripts, in Babylonian clay tablets, and in the annals of practically all cultured peoples. But the climatologists make it very clear that even should the entire water content of the atmosphere pour down as rain, the resulting flood could not have covered even the lowland slopes, far less the peaks of the mountains, as all accounts insist that this deluge did. William Whiston and the Deluge. The years 1680 and 1682 were years of unusually bright comets. Many pamphlets were printed, especially in Germany, on the imminent end of the world. At the very least, great catastrophes were expected. There was nothing new in such prognostications. In earlier centuries, and also earlier in the 17th century, comets were regarded with awe, and every possible evil effect was ascribed to them. Thus, a scholarly author, David Herlisius, published in 1619 a discourse on a comet that had appeared shortly before in 1618, and enumerated the calamities that this comet and comets in general bring with them or presage. Desiccation of the crops and barrenness, pestilence, great stormy winds, great inundations, shipwrecks, defeat of armies, or destruction of kingdom, decease of great potentates and scholars, schisms and rifts in religion, etc. The portents of comets are threefold, in part natural, in part political, and in part theological. David Herlisius also quoted Cicero. From the remotest remembrance of antiquity, it is known that comets have always presaged disasters. From the remotest remembrance of antiquity, it is known that comets have always presaged disaster. The fear and even horror caused by the comet of 1680 was just beginning to calm down when, in 1682, another great comet appeared. Edmund Halley, or Halley if you wish, was 26 years old when this comet of 1682 appeared. He had experience in astronomical observations and calculations, having spent time on the island of St. Helena, cataloging there 341 southern stars. He had observed the transit of Mercury and made pendulum observations. Now he calculated the orbit of the comet of 1682 and predicted its return in 1759. Actually, the periodicity of comets was not first discovered by Halley. The ancient authors knew that comets have their time of revolution. Seneca wrote in his treatise De Cometis, in some respects still the most advanced discussion of this subject, that the Chaldeans counted the comets among the planets. A comet with a periodicity of about 70 years was known to the rabbis. Nevertheless, only little aware of the works of the ancients, the modern world acclaimed Halley to be the discoverer of the periodicity of comets. However, this acclaim came only after his prognostication realized itself. The comet of 1682, or Halley's Comet, returned in 1759. It came somewhat retarded on account of its passage near the planets Jupiter and Saturn. This delay had been calculated, though not quite accurately, by Halley. On the grave of Halley these words are engraved: "Under this marble peacefully rests Edmundus Hellenus, LL.D., unquestionably the greatest astronomer of his age." But when Halley offered his theory of the periodicity of comets, and of the return of the observed comet after 75 years, this theory was not received immediately with enthusiasm. Yet in the mind of a contemporary mathematician, the idea of a periodic return of comets was the beginning of a broadly developed theory of the origin of the world and of the nature of the deluge. William Whiston, born in 1667, published in 1696 his New Theory of the Earth. In this book, he claimed that the comet of 1682 was of 575.5-year periodicity, that the same comet had appeared in February 1106 in plus 531 in the consulate of Lampadius and Orestes, And in September of -44, the year of Caesar's assassination, Whiston further asserted that this comet had met the Earth in -2346 and caused the deluge. Whiston found in classical literature references to the change in inclination of the terrestrial axis and ascribing it to a displacement of the poles by a comet of the deluge, concluded that before this catastrophe, the planes of daily rotation and yearly revolution coincided, and that, therefore, there had been no seasons. He also found references to a year consisting of 360 days only, and although the Greek authors referred the change to the time of Metreus and Thyestes, and the Romans to the time of Numa, circa -700, Whiston ascribed these changes to the effect of the Earth's encounter with the comet of the deluge. Whiston thought that the Earth itself was once a comet. Whiston was chosen by Isaac Newton to take over his chair of mathematics at Trinity College in Cambridge, when Newton, after many years, retired in order to dedicate himself to the duties of President of the Royal Society. Whiston, like Newton, was a Unitarian. He was also close to being a fundamentalist. He was certain that only one global catastrophe was described in the scripture, that of the deluge of the phenomenon described in the book of Joshua. He wrote, "The scripture did not intend to teach men philosophy or accommodate itself to the true Pythagorean system of the world. It is difficult to say what caused Newton, who selected Whiston as his successor, to oppose Whiston's election to the membership of the Royal Society. We have another similar instance a century later, when Sir Humphrey Davy, the mentor of Michael Faraday, conducted a strenuous campaign to keep Faraday from being admitted to the Royal Society, of which Davy was president. So much jealousy in them ranks. But the very idea of a periodicity of comets, gleaned by Whiston from Halley, was not yet accepted. In 1744, a German author wrote, "It is well known that Whiston and others like him who wished to predict the comings and goings of comets deceive themselves and have become an object of ridicule by the entire world." Still later, Whiston was ridiculed by George Cuvier, himself a proponent of a catastrophist theory. Whiston fancied that the Earth was created from the atmosphere of one comet, and that it was deluged by the tail of another. The heat which remained from its first origin, in his opinion, excited the whole antediluvian population, men and animals, to sin, for which they were all drowned in the deluge, except the fish, whose passions were apparently less violent. And some references. In the 2nd century of this era, Rabbi Joshua said, "There is a star which appears every 70 years and misleads the captains of boats." It has been suggested that this statement is a reference to Halley's Comet. The 575.5-year periodicity of the comet of 1682 and its previous returns, beginning in -44, were first proposed by Halley and accepted by Newton. Cicero, De Natura Deorum, said the Pythagoreans believed that great comets appear at great intervals of time. The same was also ascribed to Hippocrates. The case of the deluge demonstrated being an appendix to the 2nd edition of the New Theory of the Earth. Whiston changed the date calculated by the earlier cometographers so as to have a multiple of 575.5 years. David Rockenbach, Calvivius, had fixed the date at -2292 and Helicius at 2312. Deluge and the Comet. The idea that a comet heralded the deluge was not new with William Winston. It is found in several earlier authors, the so-called cometographers and chronologists of the 17th century. But they only described the appearance of the comet at the time of the deluge as a matter of fact, and did not deduce any theory from it. No causal relation was seen. It was more in the nature of a coincidence. New in Winston was the identification of the comet of 1680 as the comet of the deluge, and the perturbatory effects on the position and motion of our planet, ascribed by him to the activities of the comet. Finally, his general theory that the Earth itself was once a comet. The author, who Winston names as his source, was J. Hevelius, whose Comographia was published in 1668. Apparently, Winston did not go further back to the sources of Hevelius, to Abraham Rockenbach, Seth Calvisius, Hernicus, Exterminus, Christopher Helvicus, 1581 to 1617. Abraham Rockenbach was a scholar of the late Renaissance, a man of broad interests, already evident from the fact that he occupied both the chair of Greek and of mathematics at the University of Frankfurt, and later taught law and became dean of Philosophical College at that university in 1602. He published a short treatise in Latinicus, and in it he had the following entry concerning the deluge. It's a wonder he doesn't speak Latin, the whole thing. In the year of the creation of the world, 1656, after Noah had attained the age of 600 years, 3 days before the death of Methuselah, a comet appeared in the constellation Pisces, was seen by the entire world as it traversed the 12 signs of the zodiac in the space of a month. On the 16th of April, it again disappeared. After this, the deluge immediately followed, in which all creatures which live on earth and creep on the ground were drowned, with the exception of Noah and the rest of the creatures that had gone with him into the ark. About these things is written in Genesis chapter 7. Rockenbach lived and wrote nearly 100 years before Winston. What were Rockenbach's sources? He did not let us know. He referred to them at the beginning of his treatise, claiming that it was based on information extrabationist from most trustworthy and the most ancient of the early writers. We have already occasion to quote from Rockenbach in connection with the comet that shone during the Exodus. There he refers only to Pliny, although he probably used other sources besides. Letus, Servius, Hephaestion, and Junctinus wrote about comets, and Servius mentions also the writings of Tempestor and Petrosirus, although we may never be certain of the sources on which Abraham Rockenbach and other cometographers drew in mentioning a comet in connection with the deluge. The great medieval rabbinical authority, Rashi, was probably among them. Rashi wrote concerning Kima, a celestial body mentioned in Job 9:9 and 38:31, and in Amos 5:8, that it is a star with a tail, or a comet. In Talmud, Kima is associated with the deluge, and this seems to have been the source of the cometographer's assertion. The comet appeared in conjunction with that event. The question now is, what was Kima, and what was its role in the deluge? Was it really a comet, as Rashi thought? And there are the references. Rashi is an abbreviation for Rabbi Isaac ben Solomon. He lived in the south of France in the 11th century. His commentary to the Bible and to some parts of the Talmud is still regarded as the most authoritative in the field of rabbinical knowledge, which has great authorities in every one of the 20 centuries since the beginning of the rabbinical learning. Till today, Rashi's commentary is supplied to many Hebrew editions of the scriptures and Talmud. And world's inclusion, the comet Typhon. Thanks for listening. 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 Thanks for listening.
prescription is for
Velikovsky.
Fasten your seatbelts.
We're taxiing down the runway and about ready to take off. We're fixing to climb.
And away we go!
Before we get started, I just want to say if there's anybody like Polly or